The space station Harmony Point floated in the darkness between three star systems. It was built for one purpose: to host meetings between different alien races when they needed to talk instead of fight. The station was neutral ground where no weapons were allowed and all species were supposed to be treated equally. Kate Brooks walked down the long corridor toward the main conference room. Her blue uniform was perfectly pressed, and her short brown hair was pulled back neatly. She carried a briefcase full of documents and data pads. At 32 years old, Kate had already spent 10 years working as a diplomat for the human government. Before that, she had been a Marine for 5 years, fighting in 3 different conflicts on the outer colonies. The peace talks had been going on for 2 weeks now, and they were not going well. The Vorthan Empire wanted to expand their territory into space that belonged to the Galactic Federation. The Federation wanted to stop them without starting a war. Kate represented humanity and 5 other smaller species in these negotiations. The Vorthans were not easy to deal with. They were large reptilian creatures standing almost 8 feet tall with thick scales covering their bodies. Their culture was built around strength and dominance. They respected only power and saw compromise as weakness. Their leader for these talks was General Zarthek, a massive warrior who had conquered 12 different worlds for the Vorthan Empire. Kate entered the conference room and took her seat at the curved table. The room was large and circular, with a high ceiling that showed the stars outside through clear panels. Representatives from 8 different species sat around the table. The air recycling system hummed quietly in the background, mixing different atmospheric requirements for all the species present. General Zarthek was already in his seat across from Kate. He was even bigger than most Vorthans, with dark green, scales and bright yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. Scars covered his arms and face from countless battles. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. The Federation mediator, a tall gray alien called Counselor Vectar, called the session to order. "We will continue our discussion of territorial boundaries in the Kepler sector," he announced in his calm, neutral voice. Kate opened her briefcase and pulled out a star map. She spread it across the table so everyone could see. Red zones marked Vorthan territory, blue zones showed Federation space, and yellow areas were the disputed regions. "The Federation's position remains the same," Kate said clearly. "The Kepler sector contains 3 inhabited worlds with a combined population of over 2 billion beings. These people have lived there for generations. They chose to join the Federation for protection and trade opportunities. We cannot simply hand them over to the Vorthan Empire." General Zarthek leaned forward in his chair, which creaked under his massive weight. "Those worlds lie in the natural expansion path of the Vorthan Empire," he growled. "The weak species living there will benefit from our rule. They will learn discipline and purpose." "They will learn slavery and oppression," Kate replied without hesitation. "We have reports from 12 other worlds that the Vorthan Empire has conquered. The local populations were forced into labor camps. Their children were taken away to be trained as soldiers. Their cultures were destroyed." The general's yellow eyes narrowed. "You speak of things you do not understand, human. The Vorthan way brings order from chaos. We make the weak strong." Kate pulled out a data pad and activated its holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the table showing destroyed cities and people in chains. "This is order? This is strength?" "These are surveillance photos from Altair 7 taken just 6 months ago." Other delegates around the table shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The evidence was clear and disturbing. Several representatives whispered to their assistants. General Zarthek stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. He was now towering over everyone else in the room. "You dare show me propaganda pictures? You question the methods of the Vorthan Empire?" "I question any method that involves the systematic destruction of entire civilizations," Kate answered. She remained seated, looking up at the general without flinching. "The Federation was created to protect smaller species from exactly this kind of aggression." "The Federation is weak," the general snarled. "You hide behind words and treaties while real powers take what they need. Humans especially are soft and foolish. You have been in space for barely a century, yet you think you can lecture ancient empires." Kate slowly stood up, still much shorter than the general, but showing no fear. We may be new to space, but we learned some hard lessons on our home world. We know what happens when bullies are allowed to take whatever they want. We know what happens when good people do nothing while the strong prey on the weak. The room fell silent. Even the air recycling system seemed quieter. Counselor Vector looked nervous, his gray skin turning slightly darker. General Zarthek's scales began to change color, shifting from dark green to an angry red. This was a warning sign that all the delegates recognized. Vorthons only changed color like this when they were about to become violent. "You call us bullies?" he asked, his voice getting deeper and more threatening. "You compare the mighty Vorthon Empire to common criminals?" "I call things what they are," Kate replied. "Your empire survives by taking from others. You offer nothing in return except fear and destruction. That makes you no different from any other gang of thieves, just bigger." The general took a step toward Kate, his massive hands clenching into fists. "No one speaks to me like this. No inferior species questions Vorthon superiority." "Then maybe it's time someone did," Kate said. She picked up another data pad and held it out toward him. "These are economic projections showing what the Kepler sector could produce under Federation guidance. Compare that to the historical output of worlds under Vorthon control. The numbers speak for themselves." General Zarthek looked at the datapad for a moment, then knocked it out of Kate's hand with enough force to send it flying across the room. It hit the wall and shattered into pieces. "I do not need numbers from inferior beings," he roared. "The Vorthon Empire takes what it wants because it has the power to do so. That is the only law that matters in this galaxy." Kate looked at the broken datapad, then back at the general. Her voice remained calm and steady. "Power without wisdom is just destruction. Strength without mercy is just cruelty. Your empire will collapse eventually, just like all the others that were built on nothing but fear and violence." "Enough," General Zarthek shouted. His arm moved faster than anyone expected. His huge hand struck Kate across the face with a sound like thunder. The blow lifted Kate off her feet and sent her crashing into the conference table. Datapads and documents scattered everywhere. She rolled across the smooth surface and fell to the floor on the other side, landing hard on her shoulder. The room erupted in shocked voices from the other delegates. Counselor Vector jumped to his feet, his gray skin now almost white with horror. "General, this is neutral ground. Violence is forbidden here." Kate slowly pushed herself up from the floor. Blood ran from her split lip and a cut above her left eye. Her uniform was torn and dirty, but she got to her feet and stood straight, looking directly at General Zarthek. The general expected to see fear in her eyes. He expected her to apologize or beg for mercy. Instead, Kate wiped the blood from her mouth with the back of her hand and spoke in a voice that was perfectly calm and steady. "General," she said, "you have no idea what you just did." The news traveled faster than light itself. Within 30 minutes of the attack, emergency communication channels across human space were buzzing with activity. The quantum relay network that connected all human colonies, military bases, and ships carried the same message to every corner of human territory. Lieutenant Commander Kate Brooks had been assaulted during peace negotiations on Harmony Point. Admiral Jack Morrison was on the bridge of the battleship USS Defiance when the message reached him. The ship was patrolling the outer rim of human space, 3 days away from the nearest colony. Morrison was a veteran of 30 years in the human fleet. He had gray hair, deep lines around his eyes, and scars on his hands from his early days as an engineer. He had worked his way up from the bottom ranks to become one of the most respected commanders in human space. The communication officer, a young woman named Lisa Park, turned from her console with a pale face. "Admiral, we have an urgent message from Fleet Command. Priority Alpha." Morrison frowned. Priority Alpha messages were reserved for the most serious emergencies. "Put it through to my ready room," he ordered. 5 minutes later, Morrison emerged from his private office. His face was grim and his jaw was set in a hard line. The bridge crew could see that something had changed in their commander. He walked to the center of the bridge and activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is Admiral Morrison." His voice echoed through every corridor and room on the ship. 30 minutes ago, one of our diplomats was physically attacked during peace negotiations. The attacker was General Zarthek of the Vorthan Empire. Lieutenant Commander Kate Brooks is alive but injured. As of this moment, we are operating under Emergency Protocol 7. All leave is cancelled. All personnel report to battle stations. This is not a drill. The bridge erupted into controlled activity. Officers moved to their positions with practiced efficiency. The ship's massive engines hummed louder as power was redirected from non-essential systems. Weapon systems began their startup sequences. The same scene was playing out on human ships throughout the galaxy. Captain Lisa Chen received the news while her ship, the USS Ranger, was docked at New Tokyo Station for routine maintenance. Chen was Kate Brooks' former commanding officer from their Marine days. She had taught Kate everything about combat tactics and leadership. Chen was in the station's cantina, having dinner with her senior officers, when her communication device buzzed. She read the message twice before standing up abruptly, her chair falling backward. "What is it, Captain?" asked her first officer, Commander Bill Hayes. "They hit Kate," Chen said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Some alien general struck her during a diplomatic meeting." Commander Hayes knew about Captain Chen's history with Kate Brooks. They had served together on 3 different worlds, fighting side by side against pirates and raiders. Chen had once carried an injured Kate for 12 miles through hostile territory to reach a medical station. "What are our orders?" Hayes asked. "We're being assigned to a rapid response task force," Chen replied, already heading toward the door. "Get the crew back on board. Cancel all maintenance work. We launch in 6 hours." Back on Earth, President Robert Clark was in an emergency meeting with his cabinet and military advisors. The Situation Room was deep underground, protected by layers of concrete and metal. Large screens showed star maps and fleet positions throughout human space. "What do we know about this General Zarthek?" President Clark asked. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of steady voice that had helped him lead humanity through several crises. General Patricia Stone, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, consulted her data pad. "He's a career military officer in the Vorthan Empire. 43 years of service. He's conquered 12 worlds for them, known for using extreme brutality against civilian populations. Intelligence reports suggest he views humans as inferior beings." "And Kate Brooks?" the president asked. "She's more than just a diplomat," General Stone replied. "She served 5 years as a Marine before joining the diplomatic corps. She lost her younger brother in the Proxima Centauri incident 7 years ago. Since then, she's become something of a symbol among our military personnel. They see her as someone who understands sacrifice and won't back down from a fight." Secretary of State Helen Murphy leaned forward. "Mr. President, we need to be careful here. The Federation is trying to contain this situation through diplomatic channels. If we overreact, we could start a war." "If we underreact," President Clark replied, "we send a message that humans can be attacked without consequences. That's not a message I'm willing to send." The president activated a secure communication link to address the nation. Within minutes, his image appeared on screens across Earth and every human colony. "My fellow humans," he began. "Today, one of our representatives was assaulted while working for peace. Lieutenant Commander Kate Brooks was struck by an alien general during negotiations that were supposed to prevent conflict. She was doing her job, representing our values and our interests, when she was attacked." The president paused, letting his words sink in across human space. "We came to these talks in good faith," he continued. "We sought a peaceful solution to territorial disputes. We offered compromise and cooperation. Instead, we were met with violence. This cannot and will not be tolerated." On Harmony Point Station, Kate Brooks sat in the medical bay while a robot doctor sealed the cut above her eye. The station's medical facilities were designed to treat dozens of different alien species, so the robot had to be very careful with human anatomy. Counselor Vectar, the Federation mediator, stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. His gray skin was still pale from the shock of what had happened. "Lieutenant Commander Brooks," he said carefully, "I want you to know that the Federation condemns what happened today. General Zarthek's actions were completely unacceptable." Kate looked at him with her good eye. The other was swollen shut. What happens now? The Federation Council is meeting in emergency session, Vectar replied. There will be a formal investigation. The General will face disciplinary action. Disciplinary action? Kate asked. He assaulted a diplomatic representative during peace negotiations. In most civilized societies, that would be considered an act of war. Vectar shifted nervously. The Federation prefers to resolve conflicts through peaceful means. We must not let this incident destroy the possibility of a negotiated settlement. Kate stood up slowly, testing her balance. The medical robot had done good work, but she still felt dizzy. Counselor, with respect, the General just showed you what he thinks of negotiated settlements. He showed you what happens when someone disagrees with him. Meanwhile, in the Vorthan section of the station, General Zarthek was meeting with his advisors. Unlike the humans, the Vorthans seemed pleased with the day's events. The human female learned her place, the General said, his scales still showing, traces of red from his earlier anger. Now perhaps they will be more reasonable in their demands. His second-in-command, Colonel Kethmore, nodded agreement. The humans are soft, General. They will file complaints and make speeches, but they will not act. They are too civilized for real conflict. Exactly, General Zarthek replied. They talk about principles and values, but they lack the stomach for violence. This incident will make them more willing to compromise. But the Vorthans were wrong about humans. They had misunderstood something fundamental about human nature. Humans could be peaceful, diplomatic, and civilized, but they could also be something else entirely when their people were threatened. Across human space, the response was swift and unified. Military personnel reported to their ships early. Civilian contractors began working double shifts to supply the fleet. Colonists who had never served in the military volunteered for training programs. On the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, factory workers stayed late to produce additional ammunition and spare parts. On the agricultural planet of Green Valley, farmers organized to ensure food supplies for the fleet. On the mining world of Red Rock, excavation crews worked around the clock to extract rare metals needed for ship construction. The human response was not just military, it was cultural, economic, and emotional. An attack on one human was seen as an attack on all humans. Kate Brooks had become a symbol of human dignity and determination. Back on the USS Defiance, Admiral Morrison studied intelligence reports about Vorthan military capabilities. The aliens had larger ships and more advanced weapons in some areas, but they also had weaknesses. Their command structure was rigid and slow to adapt. Their tactics were predictable. Most importantly, they underestimated their opponents. Sir, Communication Officer Park called from her station. We're receiving status reports from the fleet. All ships are reporting ready for combat operations. Morrison nodded. Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them the Third Fleet is ready to move on your orders. The General had made a serious mistake when he struck Kate Brooks. He had assumed that humans would respond like the other species he had conquered, with fear and submission. Instead, he had awakened something much more dangerous. He had awakened human anger. The Federation Council chambers on Unity Station were in chaos. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned seats, all talking at once. The circular chamber echoed with voices speaking in dozens of languages, creating a noise that the universal translators struggled to process. Chancellor Mordeth, the elderly leader of the Melodian species, called for order. The Melodians were peaceful beings who looked like tall, thin plants with golden leaves instead of hair. They had helped found the Federation 300 years ago and believed that all conflicts could be solved through discussion and compromise. The emergency session will come to order, Chancellor Mordeth announced, his voice carrying through the chamber's sound system. We are here to discuss the incident that occurred on Harmony Point Station between General Zarthek of the Vorthan Empire and Lieutenant Commander Kate Brooks of the Human Republic. The Vorthan representative, Ambassador Kraltok, stood up in his section. He was smaller than General Zarthek, but still impressive, with dark blue scales and cold yellow eyes. The Federation makes too much of a simple disciplinary action, he said. The human female was disrespectful and needed to learn proper behavior. General Zarthek was teaching her manners. A wave of angry voices erupted from several sections of the chamber. The human representative, Ambassador Carl Davis, stood up with his face red with anger. Disciplinary action? Teaching manners? A decorated officer was assaulted during a peace negotiation. This was not discipline. It was an unprovoked attack. The Krellian representative also stood up. The Krellians were a warrior species similar to the Vorthons, but with a stronger sense of honor. Even in war, there are rules, the Krellian said. To strike a negotiator during talks is cowardly and without honor. Ambassador Kraltok's scales darkened with anger. The Vorthon Empire does not need lectures about honor from species that fear true strength. Meanwhile, on Harmony Point Station, Kate Brooks was no longer in the medical bay. She had returned to her quarters and was working at her personal computer. Her left eye was still swollen, and her lip was split. But she moved with purpose and determination. She had established a secure communication link with human intelligence services. On her screen were detailed maps of Vorthon military installations, fleet positions, and supply routes. Kate had not just been a diplomat for the past 10 years. She had also been gathering intelligence about potential threats to human space. Her door chimed, and she looked up to see Counselor Vektar standing in the hallway. The gray alien looked even more worried than before. "May I come in?" he asked politely. Kate gestured for him to enter. "What can I do for you, Counselor?" "The Federation Council is meeting," Vektar said, taking a seat across from her desk. "They are trying to find a peaceful solution to this situation, but I am concerned about the human response. Your fleet movements suggest military preparation." Kate looked at him steadily. "What did you expect, Counselor? That we would simply file a complaint and continue as if nothing happened? The Federation has procedures for handling such incidents," Vektar replied. "There will be an investigation, a formal apology, perhaps some compensation." "An apology?" Kate asked, touching her swollen eye. "From someone who thinks striking a negotiator is appropriate behavior. What happens the next time a human disagrees with Vorthon demands? Do we get struck again?" Vektar shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The general's actions were unfortunate, but starting a war over one incident would be a tragedy for the entire galaxy. Kate turned her computer screen so that Vektar could see the intelligence reports. "Counselor, look at these files. The Vorthon Empire has conquered 18 worlds in the past 20 years. They have enslaved billions of people. They have destroyed entire cultures. This was not one incident. This was just the first time they did it to a human." In the Vorthon section of Harmony Point, General Zarthek was holding his own meeting. He sat at a large table with his senior officers, reviewing reports about human military movements. "The humans are mobilizing their fleet," reported Colonel Kethmore. "Intelligence suggests they are preparing for military action." General Zarthek laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Let them come. The human fleet is small and their ships are weak. They have been in space for less than a century. We have been conquering worlds for 1,000 years. "Should we request reinforcements from the home fleet?" asked another officer. "No," the general replied. "We have enough ships in this sector to handle the humans. When they see our strength, they will surrender quickly. Then we can take their worlds without resistance." But the Vorthons were making the same mistake that many species had made when dealing with humans. They were judging human capabilities based on the size of their fleet and the age of their civilization. They were not considering human psychology, tactics, or determination. On the human colony world of New Denver, Colonel Mike Rodriguez was briefing his staff about potential Vorthon attacks. New Denver was one of the closest human worlds to Vorthon space, making it a likely target if war broke out. "Intelligence reports suggest the Vorthons have 12 ships in this sector," Rodriguez told his officers. "Their standard tactic is to attack military installations first, then demand surrender from civilian leaders." "What about evacuation?" asked Major Susan Clark, his second in command. "The colonists refuse to leave," Rodriguez replied. "They say this is their home, and they will not be driven away by bullies." Major Clark nodded. She had expected this response. The people of New Denver were mostly farmers and miners who had worked hard to build their community. They were not soldiers, but they were tough and stubborn. "Then we make our stand here," she said. "Yes," Rodriguez agreed. "But we do not fight like the Vorthons expect. We do not line up our ships for a formal battle. We make them pay for every meter of ground." Back in space, the human fleet was moving into position. Captain Lisa Chen commanded a task force of 8 ships, including her flagship USS Ranger. They were not the largest ships in human space, but they were fast and well-armed. Chen studied the tactical displays on her bridge. The Vorthons had superior firepower, but they were predictable. Their military manuals, captured during previous conflicts, showed a preference for direct assault tactics. "Commander Hayes," she called to her first officer, "what is the status of the stealth reconnaissance mission?" "Captain Steve Parker reports that the USS Shadow has successfully infiltrated Vorthon space," Hayes replied. "They are gathering intelligence on fleet positions and supply routes." Chen smiled grimly. The USS Shadow was one of the newest ships in the human fleet, equipped with advanced stealth technology. The Vorthons would never see it coming. On Earth, President Clark was meeting with leaders from other human colonies via holographic conference. The colony governors and military commanders appeared as life-sized images around the conference table. "The situation is escalating rapidly," President Clark told them. "The Vorthons are interpreting our military preparations as weakness. They think we are just making threats." Governor Sarah Kim of the Alpha Centauri colonies leaned forward. "Mr. President, the people of my worlds are ready to support whatever action you decide to take. Kate Brooks visited our colonies last year. People remember her dedication to protecting human interests. The same is true here," added Governor Tom Wright of the Tau Ceti system. "Our people understand that this is about more than one person. This is about whether humans will be respected in this galaxy or treated as second-class citizens." President Clark nodded. "The Federation is pressuring us to accept a formal apology and return to negotiations. But I do not believe the Vorthons will honor any agreement they make. They see compromise as weakness." Meanwhile, intelligence reports were flowing in from across Vorthon space. Captain Parker and the crew of the USS Shadow had discovered something important: the Vorthon fleet. In this sector was not as strong as it appeared. Many of their ships were old and poorly maintained. Their supply lines were stretched thin across multiple star systems. The information was transmitted back to human command centers, where analysts began planning potential strategies. The humans would not fight the kind of battle the Vorthons expected. They would use speed, stealth, and precision strikes to maximum advantage. Back on Harmony Point, the peace talks had completely broken down. The human delegation had withdrawn from negotiations, and the other Federation species were trying to mediate between the two sides. Kate Brooks received a personal message from Admiral Morrison. The text was brief. "Kate, we have not forgotten what happened. The fleet stands ready. Your sacrifice will not be in vain." She closed the message and returned to her intelligence work. The Vorthons thought they had silenced her with violence. Instead, they had given her a reason to fight back. General Zarthek made one final mistake in judgment. He sent an ultimatum to the human government, demanding a formal apology and acceptance of Vorthon territorial claims. He gave humanity 24 hours to respond. The general expected the humans to negotiate or surrender. He did not expect them to use those 24 hours to position their fleet for a first strike. He did not expect them to turn his ultimatum into a declaration of war. The countdown had begun. The attack on New Denver began at dawn. 12 Vorthon warships dropped out of hyperspace above the human colony world. The ships were massive, each one 3 times larger than the biggest human vessel. Their hulls were dark gray with red markings that showed their battle honors. General Zarthek himself commanded the assault from his flagship, the Dominator. Colonel Mike Rodriguez watched the enemy ships from his command bunker deep underground. The bunker had been built into a mountain outside the main city. Around him, his staff monitored screens showing the approaching alien fleet. "They are taking standard attack formation," reported Major Susan Clark, "just like the tactical manuals predicted." Rodriguez nodded grimly. The Vorthons were doing exactly what human intelligence expected. They positioned their largest ships in the center, with smaller vessels protecting the flanks. It was a formation designed for attacking other large fleets in open space. "Send the signal to all units," Rodriguez ordered. Operation Wasp Nest is now active. Across the planet, hidden weapon emplacements powered up. The colonists had spent the past week preparing for this moment. Every farm, every mine, every small town now contained hidden missile launchers and energy weapons. The Vortons would find no easy targets on New Denver. General Zarthek stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the green and blue world below. The planet looked peaceful, with scattered cities and vast agricultural areas. He expected the humans to surrender quickly once they saw the size of his fleet. "Open a communication channel to the planetary government," he ordered. A few moments later, the image of Colonel Rodriguez appeared on the main screen. The human officer was wearing combat armor and looked completely calm. "I am General Zartek of the Vorthon Empire," the alien commander announced. "Your world is now under Vorthon control. Order your military forces to surrender and your people will not be harmed." Rodriguez looked at the general for a long moment before responding. "General, I have a message for you from the people of New Denver. We respectfully decline your offer." General Zartek's scales darkened with anger. "You cannot resist us. We have 12 warships. You have no orbital defenses." "That is correct," Rodriguez agreed. "We have no orbital defenses. But we have something else." "What?" the general demanded. Rodriguez smiled coldly. "We have a really bad attitude about uninvited guests." The transmission ended. General Zartek stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his weapons officer. "Begin the bombardment. Target their military installations first." But when the Vorthon ships opened fire, they discovered their first surprise. The humans had built dummy installations that looked like military bases from space. The real defensive positions were hidden underground or disguised as civilian buildings. The bombardment destroyed empty buildings and fake targets, while the real human defenses remained untouched. Then the colonists struck back. Missile launchers hidden in farm silos opened fire. Energy weapons concealed in mining equipment targeted the Vorthon ships. Anti-aircraft batteries disguised as water towers sent streams of projectiles into space. Attacks came from everywhere at once. The Vorthons had expected to fight a conventional battle against military targets. Instead, they faced an entire planet full of hidden weapons operated by angry farmers and miners. "Report," General Zarthek shouted as his ship shook from multiple impacts. "We are taking fire from over 200 locations," his tactical officer replied. "The entire planet appears to be armed." "Impossible," the general snarled. "These are civilians, not soldiers." "Tell that to them," the tactical officer muttered as another wave of missiles struck the ship's shields. In space, the battle was not going as the Vorthons expected. Human ships began appearing throughout the system, but not where the aliens anticipated. Instead of challenging the Vorthon fleet directly, the human vessels attacked supply ships, communication relays, and isolated patrol craft. Captain Lisa Chen commanded her task force from the bridge of the USS Ranger. Her ships moved in small groups, hitting targets quickly and then disappearing before the main Vorthon fleet could respond. "Target that supply convoy," Chen ordered her weapons officer. "Hit them fast and get out." The USS Ranger and 3 escort ships dropped out of hyperspace near a group of Vorthon cargo vessels. The human ships opened fire immediately, destroying 2 supply ships and damaging a 3rd before jumping back to hyperspace. "That is the 8th supply convoy we have hit today," reported Commander Hayes. "The Vorthons are having trouble keeping their fleet supplied." Chen studied the tactical display. "Good. Make them choose between protecting their supply lines and attacking our colonies. Either way, we control the pace of this fight." Meanwhile, Captain Steve Parker and the crew of the USS Shadow were conducting the most dangerous mission of the war. The stealth ship had penetrated deep into Vorthon space and was approaching the enemy home fleet. "Passive sensors are detecting over 50 Vorthon ships," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster, the ship's sensor officer. "They are preparing to move toward human space." Parker studied the readings carefully. The Vorthan reinforcements would change the balance of power if they reached the battle zone, but the enemy ships were still several days away from human territory. "Prepare the quantum torpedoes," Parker ordered. "We are going to send them a message they will not forget." The USS Shadow moved silently through the Vorthan fleet, targeting key ships with its most powerful weapons. The quantum torpedoes were a new human technology that could penetrate even the strongest shields. The first torpedo struck a Vorthan command ship, causing a massive explosion that lit up space for thousands of kilometers. The second torpedo hit a supply depot, creating a chain reaction that destroyed 3 more ships. By the time the Vorthans realized they were under attack, the USS Shadow had already jumped back to hyperspace. The enemy fleet was in chaos, with ships scattered across the system and their command structure disrupted. Back on New Denver, the ground battle was intensifying. Vorthan Marines had landed in several locations, but they found the colonists ready. For them, every human settlement had been turned into a fortress. In the mining town of Red Hill, a force of 200 Vorthan soldiers tried to capture the local communication center. They expected to face a few security guards and some frightened civilians. Instead, they found themselves fighting 300 human miners who knew every tunnel and cave in the area. The miners used guerrilla tactics, attacking from hidden positions and then disappearing underground. Mary Johnson was a 60-year-old grandmother who had lived in Red Hill for 30 years. She was also a former military engineer who knew how to make improvised explosives from mining equipment. "They want our home," she told her neighbors as they prepared another ambush. "Well, they can have it. One piece at a time." The Vorthan Marines were trained for conventional warfare, not for fighting an entire population of determined defenders. Every building could contain snipers. Every road could be mined. Every civilian could be an enemy combatant. General Zarthek received reports of the fighting from his flagship. The situation was not developing as he had planned. The human resistance was far stronger than expected, and his supply lines were under constant attack. "Sir," his communication officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet." Admiral Morrison's image appeared on the screen. The human commander looked calm and professional, despite the battle raging around his ships. "General Zarthek," Morrison said, "I am offering you one chance to withdraw your forces from human space. Leave now, and no further action will be taken against your fleet." The general's scales turned bright red with rage. "You dare offer terms? To me? Your pathetic fleet cannot stand against Vorthan power." "General," Morrison replied, "you struck one of our diplomats. You attacked our colonies. You started this war, but we will finish it. Your threats do not frighten me." Zarthek snarled. "We will crush your resistance and enslave your people." Morrison's expression did not change. "I was hoping you would be reasonable. Since you are not, let me show you what human determination looks like." The transmission ended. A few moments later, alarms began sounding throughout the Vorthan fleet. "Report," the general demanded. "Human ships are emerging from hyperspace all around us." His tactical officer replied with panic in his voice. "They are surrounding the entire fleet." General Zarthek looked at his sensors and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The humans had not just brought their local defense fleet. They had brought ships from across their entire territory. Hundreds of vessels were taking position around the Vorthan force. "How many ships?" he asked quietly. "Over 300, sir, and more are arriving every minute." The general realized he had made a terrible mistake. He had thought he was fighting a small human defense force. Instead, he was facing the entire human fleet, along with thousands of colonists who refused to surrender. On the surface of New Denver, Colonel Rodriguez received a message from Admiral Morrison. "Mike, we have the Vorthan fleet surrounded. Can you hold your position for a few more hours?" Rodriguez looked around his command bunker. Half his staff was wounded, and they were running low on ammunition. But the colonists were still fighting, and the Vorthans had not captured a single major objective. The surrender came 3 hours later. General Zarthek stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the tactical display that showed his fleet completely surrounded by human ships. His officers waited silently for orders that never came. The proud Vorthan commander who had conquered 12 worlds was trapped like an animal in a cage. Admiral Morrison's voice came over the communication system. "General, your fleet is surrounded and your ground forces are cut off. You have 1 minute to surrender or we will open fire." The general looked around his bridge at his crew. Many of them were young officers who had never faced defeat before. Their scales had turned pale with fear and confusion. The mighty Vorthan Empire was not supposed to lose battles to inferior species. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we are completely outnumbered. The humans have over 400 ships now. More are arriving every hour." General Zarthek closed his eyes for a moment. His entire military career had been built on the belief that Vorthan's strength was superior to all other species. Now that belief lay in ruins around him. "Open a channel to the human fleet," he said finally. Admiral Morrison appeared on the screen, flanked by his senior officers. The human commander looked tired but determined. Behind him, the bridge of the USS Defiance bustled with activity as the crew managed the largest human fleet operation in history. "Admiral Morrison," the general said, his voice barely above a whisper, "the Vorthan fleet surrenders." The words seemed to echo through both bridges. On the human ship, officers looked at each other with surprise and relief. The war that had threatened to consume the entire sector was over. "General," Morrison replied, "order your ground forces to cease fire and return to their ships. Any Vorthan troops who surrender will be treated according to the laws of war." Within hours, Vorthan Marines across New Denver were laying down their weapons. Many of them were wounded and exhausted from fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere, at once. The human colonists watched them with hard eyes but did not mistreat the prisoners. Colonel Rodriguez emerged from his command bunker for the first time in 3 days. The town around him was damaged but not destroyed. The colonists had fought for every building, every street, every meter of their home world. Mary Johnson, the grandmother who had helped organize the resistance in Red Hill, walked up to him with her mining helmet still on her head. "Colonel, is it really over?" "It's over, Mary," Rodriguez replied. "We won." The old woman nodded and then surprised him by starting to cry. "I was so scared," she admitted. "Not of dying, but of losing our home. This place is everything we worked for." Rodriguez put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You and your neighbors saved this world. The whole galaxy is going to hear about what happened here." Back in space, the process of accepting the Vorthan surrender was complex. Hundreds of alien ships had to be secured and their crews processed. Human Marines boarded each vessel to ensure that all weapons were disabled. Captain Lisa Chen led the boarding party onto General Zarthek's flagship. The Vorthan crew stood at attention as the humans took control of their ship. Chen had expected to feel satisfaction at this moment, but instead she felt only sadness at the waste of life that could have been avoided. "Where is General Zarthek?" she asked the Vorthan second-in-command. "The general is in his quarters," Colonel Kethmore replied. "He has not spoken since the surrender." Chen found the alien commander sitting alone in his cabin, staring out at the stars. The massive reptilian warrior looked smaller somehow, as if defeat had physically diminished him. "General," Chen said, "you are under arrest for assault on a diplomatic representative and for starting an unprovoked war." Zarthek looked at her with tired yellow eyes. "I do not understand," he said quietly. "We are the stronger species. We have more ships, better weapons, greater experience. How did you defeat us?" Chen considered the question carefully. "General, you made the mistake of thinking that strength only comes from ships and weapons. You forgot about the strength that comes from fighting for something you believe in." On Harmony Point Station, Kate Brooks was packing her belongings when the news of the surrender reached her. The diplomatic quarters felt empty now that the peace talks had ended in war. She touched the small scar above her left eye where the general had struck her. Counselor Vektar knocked on her door. The Federation mediator looked older and more tired than when the talks had begun weeks earlier. "Lieutenant Commander Brooks," he said, "I wanted to apologize for what happened here. The Federation failed to protect you." Kate looked at him thoughtfully. "Counselor, The Federation did not fail. One individual chose violence over negotiation. That was his choice, not yours. But the war, Vector protested. All the death and destruction that followed could have been avoided if General Zarthek had chosen differently, Kate replied. We came here seeking peace. We were willing to compromise. He chose to strike rather than negotiate. She picked up her briefcase and headed toward the door. Sometimes, counselor, the only way to preserve peace is to show bullies that there are consequences for their actions. 2 weeks later, Kate Brooks stood in the same conference room where she had been attacked. But now the situation was completely different. General Zarthek sat at the table in restraints flanked by human guards. Representatives from the Galactic Federation filled the other seats. Chancellor Mordeth called the session to order. We are here to determine the fate of General Zarthek and the future relationship between the Vorthan Empire and the Galactic Federation. The Vorthan government had collapsed in the aftermath of the defeat. Species that had been conquered by the Empire were rebelling. Client races were declaring independence. The mighty war machine that Zarthek had served was falling apart. Kate Brooks stood to address the assembly. Her uniform was clean and pressed, and the scar on her face had healed to a thin line. But everyone in the room remembered the moment that had started this crisis. General Zarthek, she began, you struck me because you believed that might makes right. You thought that because you were stronger you could take whatever you wanted. The general looked up at her but said nothing. You were wrong, Kate continued. Strength without wisdom is just destruction. Power without mercy is just cruelty. Your empire was built on fear, and now it is crumbling because fear is not a foundation that lasts. She paused and looked around the room at the assembled representatives. However, she said, I do not believe in revenge. I believe in justice and the possibility of redemption. Therefore, I propose that General Zarthek be given a choice. The room fell silent. Even the general looked surprised. He can spend the rest of his life in prison for his crimes, Kate said, or he can spend the next 10 years working on the worlds his forces damaged, helping to rebuild what was destroyed. General Zarthek stared at her in shock. You would trust me with such work? I would give you the chance to prove that you can choose differently, Kate replied. The general was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. I choose to rebuild. Perhaps I can learn what real strength means. The War Crimes Tribunal accepted Kate's proposal. General Zarthek was sentenced to 10 years of community service, helping to rebuild the worlds damaged by Vorthan attacks. It was a controversial decision, but it sent a message about human values that resonated throughout the galaxy. Admiral Morrison was promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of the new Galactic Defense Force, a joint military organization designed to prevent future conflicts. Captain Chen became the youngest admiral in human history, taking command of the expanded human fleet. The USS Defiance was retired to a place of honor at the Naval Academy on Earth, where young officers learned about the battle that had changed humanity's place in the galaxy. But the ship's name lived on in a new class of vessels designed for deep space operations. Kate Brooks returned to diplomatic service, but now when she entered a negotiation room, alien representatives stood out, of respect. The thin scar above her eye became a symbol throughout human space, a reminder of the day humanity proved that they would not be intimidated or ignored. The Vorthan Empire never recovered from its defeat. The client species that had been conquered, over centuries of expansion, declared their independence and joined the Federation. The galaxy became more peaceful as the threat of Vorthan aggression ended. Years later, when new officers reported for duty on human ships, their commanders would tell them the story of Lieutenant Commander Kate Brooks and General Zarthek. They would learn about the day when one act of violence changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The lesson was simple but important. Humanity had come to the stars seeking peace and cooperation. But they had also brought with them the one thing that bullies and tyrants could never understand, the absolute refusal to surrender when their people were threatened. In the end, General Zarthek had been right about one thing. He had taught the galaxy about strength. But the lesson was not the one he intended to teach. He had taught them about human strength,